I found out about the ranch on a Tuesday afternoon through a phone call I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, and I was busy. If I'd let it go to voicemail, the next few months of my life might have unfolded very differently. But I picked up, listened, and within 5 minutes, everything I thought I knew about my future shifted. A distant relative had passed away. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who had always lived quietly, deliberately. He owned land, real land. Not a lot, not flashy, but meaningful. A ranch just outside a small residential development, technically bordering it, but never part of it. Outside the HOA. That detail mattered more than I realized at the time. The attorney explained the basics. The property was cleanly titled, fully paid off, and transferred directly to me. No liens. No disputes on record. No complications. Just paperwork and time. I remember sitting there after the call ended, staring at the wall, letting it settle. I wasn't thinking about fences or neighbors or politics. I was thinking about space. Quiet. Possibility. I didn't rush out there right away. There were documents to sign, logistics to handle, a life to untangle before moving. The ranch wasn't going anywhere. It had stood there for decades without my involvement. A few more weeks wouldn't matter. That assumption turned out to be my first mistake. About 10 days later, I got a call from a local realtor. She was polite, hesitant, the kind of tone people use when they aren't sure how much someone already knows. She asked if I was the new owner of the property on the east side of the development. I said yes. There was a pause. Then she said, "I'm calling because there seems to be some confusion about a recent sale." That word stopped me. Sale. She explained that the ranch, or at least what she believed to be the ranch, had been listed, shown, and sold less than a week earlier. Cash transaction. Quick close. No financing. No delays. I told her that couldn't be right. She didn't argue. She emailed me the listing. I opened it slowly, expecting a mistake. Wrong address, wrong parcel, something simple. It wasn't. The photos were unmistakable. The fencing, the dirt road, the old barn near the tree line. The land I'd just inherited was being advertised like it belonged to someone else. And the seller? Not me. Not my relative. Not anyone with legal standing. It was a woman listed as an HOA property liaison. I felt something tighten in my chest, not panic, not anger yet, just disbelief. The kind that takes a second to register, because it's so absurd. I asked the realtor how that was possible. She told me what she'd been told. That the property was unused. That it was under HOA oversight. That it had been absorbed years ago. None of that was true. The ranch was never part of the HOA. It predated the development entirely. The boundary lines were clear. The documents were clear. Someone hadn't made a mistake. Someone had made a decision. I thanked the realtor and ended the call. Then I called the attorney who handled the inheritance. He pulled the records while I waited. 10 minutes later, he confirmed it. The land was mine. Legally. Unequivocally. Which meant only one thing. Someone had sold property they didn't own. And I hadn't even moved in yet. At that point, I still believed it could be resolved quietly. That it was a misunderstanding, a paperwork error, a boundary confusion that would collapse under scrutiny. I was wrong. Because before I could even make the next call, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a realtor. It was 911 dispatch. And they were asking me why I was trespassing on HOA-controlled land. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be simple. And it definitely wasn't going to stay polite. The dispatcher's voice was calm, rehearsed, the kind of calm that comes from hearing hundreds of versions of the same story every week. She asked for my name, my location, and whether I was currently on the property. I told her yes. She asked who had given me permission to be there. That question landed harder than anything else so far. I told her I didn't need permission. I was the owner. The property had been transferred to me legally, and I was standing on land that belonged to me. There was a pause. Then she said, "Sir, the caller states the land is under HOA control and that you are refusing to leave." That word again. Control. I didn't argue with the dispatcher. I didn't raise my voice or try to explain the entire situation in one breath. I simply told her that the land was outside the HOA, that I had the deed, and that officers were welcome to verify everything on site. She thanked me and said deputies were already en route. That was it. No accusation. No warning. Just procedure. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the reality sink in. I hadn't even unpacked a box yet, and I was already being reported for trespassing on my own land. I drove the perimeter slowly, stopping where the ranch met the development. The transition was obvious. Manicured lawns ended. Gravel began. The fence line followed the survey exactly, the same line it had followed for decades. There was no ambiguity, and yet someone had acted like there was. A black SUV pulled up near the main access road a few minutes later. A woman stepped out, phone still in her hand, posture rigid, expression already set. I recognized her from the listing. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't ask who I was. She told me I needed to leave immediately. This property was sold, she said. You're trespassing. I asked her who sold it. She said, I did. That was the moment disbelief gave way to clarity. I asked under what authority. She explained, confidently, that as the HOA's property liaison, she was responsible for managing and used parcels adjacent to the development, that the ranch had been abandoned, that the HOA had absorbed responsibility years ago. None of that created ownership. I told her that calmly. She didn't react well. Her voice sharpened. She told me I was being difficult, that I was interfering with a legal sale, that the buyers were already in escrow, and that my presence was creating a safety issue. Then she repeated what she'd already done. I've called 911, she said, and I told them you refused to leave. I looked at her and nodded. Good, I said. They can sort this out. That caught her off guard. She expected me to argue, to retreat, to panic. Instead, I pulled up the deed on my phone and waited. She paced while we waited, making calls of her own. I heard fragments, board approval, oversight, emergency access. Every word dug the hole deeper. When the deputies arrived, she spoke first. She always spoke first. She told them I was trespassing, that the land had been sold legally, that I was obstructing HOA business. The deputies listened. Then one of them turned to me and asked the only question that mattered. Do you own this property? I said yes. And for the second time that day, the truth was about to collide with someone who had never expected to be questioned. The situation wasn't loud yet, but it was no longer under her control, and it was about to move very fast. The deputies didn't react immediately. They didn't raise their voices or take sides. They stood where they were, letting the space between the stories speak for itself. One of them asked her for documentation, proof of sale, proof of authority, anything that established ownership. She smiled when he asked, not confidently, relieved. She reached into her bag and handed over a folder, thick with papers. HOA letterhead, meeting minutes, internal approvals, a sales contract signed by her and the buyers. The deputy flipped through it slowly. Then he asked a question that shifted the air. Do you have the deed? Her smile faltered. She explained that the HOA didn't hold deeds the way individuals did, that the land had been assumed under management, that the paperwork showed intent and approval. The deputy nodded politely and turned to me. Do you have proof of ownership? I handed him my phone. The deed was there. The transfer record. The county stamp. The parcel number matched the fence line we were standing on. The map showed the development stopping exactly where the ranch began. He studied it carefully. So did the second deputy. They compared the documents side by side, her assumptions against my records. HOA authority against county law. Internal approval versus public record. It wasn't close. One of the deputies stepped away to make a call. When he came back, his tone was different. Still calm, but firmer. This property is not part of the HOA, he said. And it was never transferred to them. She tried to interrupt. He held up a hand. That means, he continued, you had no authority to sell it. The words landed like a dropped plate. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Tried again. But it wasn't used, she said. We maintained it. Everyone knew. Maintenance doesn't create ownership, the deputy replied. The second deputy asked her if she had recorded any transfer with the county. She said no. He asked if she had power of attorney. She said no. He asked if the HOA had ever paid property taxes on the ranch. She went quiet. The deputies exchanged a look, not dramatic, not judgmental. Just professional recognition. This wasn't a civil misunderstanding. This was something else. One of them explained it plainly. Selling property you don't own isn't an HOA violation. It isn't a zoning issue. It's a crime. Her posture changed instantly. The confidence drained out of her shoulders, replaced by something brittle and defensive. She started talking faster, explaining intentions, explaining confusion, explaining history. None of it mattered anymore. The deputy asked her for the buyer's information. Names. Contacts. Payment method. She hesitated, then provided it. He wrote it down. Then he asked her another question. Did you call 911 to report the owner for trespassing on land you don't own? She didn't answer, because there was no answer that helped her now. The deputy explained that making a false report, especially to remove a legal owner from their own property, carried consequences. That the situation had escalated beyond a simple dispute. She finally looked at me. Not angry. Not defiant. Afraid. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for me. The deputies told her she needed to step back while they documented everything. They asked me if I wanted to press charges immediately or proceed through the county first. That question hit harder than anything else so far, because it made the situation irreversible. This wasn't about undoing a sale. This was about accountability. She had crossed a line she couldn't step back over. Not with volume, not with authority, not with assumptions. Standing there, watching the situation flip in real time, I understood something clearly. She hadn't sold the ranch by mistake. She'd sold it because she believed no one would stop her. And now, for the first time, someone had. The deputies didn't arrest her on the spot. That surprised a lot of people who later heard the story, but it made sense in the moment. Law enforcement isn't there to perform. They document, secure facts, and hand the situation off to the systems designed to finish it. And this situation had already crossed into that territory. One deputy stayed with her while the other walked the property line with me. He asked practical questions: how long I'd owned the ranch when I discovered the sale, whether anyone had ever asked permission to list it. I answered calmly, sticking to dates and documents. Facts. Always facts. He photographed the fence line, the access road, the barn, the posted parcel markers. Each photo anchored reality in a way no HOA meeting ever could. The land wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't absorbed. It wasn't forgotten. It was mine. Meanwhile, the other deputy was on the phone again. This time with the county recorder's office. Then the tax assessor. Then, briefly, someone I couldn't hear on the other end, but whose tone changed the moment they learned what had happened. By the time the calls ended, the mood had shifted completely. The deputy explained what would happen next. The so-called sale was void. Not questionable, void. The buyers would be contacted, informed that the seller had no authority, and directed to recover their funds. The listing agent would be required to freeze the transaction and provide all communications. And the HOA? They were about to have a very uncomfortable week. The woman tried to speak again. Not loudly, not confidently. She asked if this could be handled internally. If it really needed to involve the county. The deputy shook his head. Property fraud isn't an internal matter, he said. That was the end of that conversation. They took her information. They took copies of her documents. They advised her not to contact the buyers again and not to step foot on the ranch. The words were polite. The meaning wasn't. Before leaving, one of the deputies turned to me. You should secure the property immediately, he said. Change any access points. Post signage. And contact a real estate attorney. I already had one on speed dial. That night, the ranch didn't feel violated. It felt exposed. I stayed on the property longer than I'd planned, walking the perimeter again as the sun dropped lower. Every fence post felt more significant now. Every boundary line mattered. Not emotionally, legally. The next morning, things accelerated. My attorney filed an emergency notice with the county, formally asserting ownership and flagging the attempted fraudulent transfer. A cease and desist went out to the HOA board, another to the listing brokerage. By noon, the listing was gone. By the end of the day, the buyers had reached out, confused, embarrassed, and angry. They'd been told the ranch was HOA-controlled surplus land, that the sale was routine, that there was no risk. None of that was true. I didn't blame them. They were victims too. The HOA board issued a statement 2 days later. Carefully worded.
Vague.
It referred to an unauthorized action by an individual acting outside the scope of her role. They didn't say her name. They didn't deny the sale. They didn't claim ownership. That silence said more than any apology could. County investigators followed up the next week. Then the week after that. Requests for emails, meeting minutes, financial records, tax history. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about how far someone had gone under the cover of assumed authority and how long no one had questioned it. Standing on the ranch a week later, watching the wind move through the grass, I realized something unsettling. If I hadn't answered that first phone call, if I hadn't checked the listing, if I hadn't shown up when I did, the land would have been gone.
Sold.
Recorded. Occupied. Not because the law failed, but because silence almost did. And that was the part that stayed with me as the consequences continued to unfold. The legal process didn't explode the way people expect justice to. There were no dramatic arrests, no viral courtroom scenes, no public apology delivered through clenched teeth. What happened instead was slower and far more permanent. Within a month, the county finalized its findings. The attempted sale was officially classified as property fraud, not a misunderstanding, not a clerical error. The paperwork trail was too clean, too intentional. Emails showed planning. HOA meeting notes showed awareness. Financial records showed money moving before authority existed. That distinction mattered. The woman resigned from the HOA board before she was formally removed. Her resignation letter was short. No explanation. No accountability. Just a statement about personal reasons. It fooled no one. The HOA itself was fined. Not a symbolic amount, a real one. Enough to force a special assessment meeting. Enough to make neighbors who'd never cared about governance suddenly pay attention. Policies changed. Voting thresholds tightened. Any claim over adjacent land now required county verification and owner consent, documented and archived. All because one person assumed no one would show up in time. The buyers recovered their funds through the brokerage's insurance. The agent lost their license for failure to verify ownership. Another quiet consequence. Another door closed without ceremony. As for the ranch, I did exactly what the deputy suggested. I secured it. New gates, reinforced locks, updated signage posted at every access point, survey markers refreshed, boundaries clarified in a way that left no room for interpretation or imagination. I didn't do it out of fear. I did it out of respect for the land and for the fact that ownership only exists if it's actively defended. A few months later, I attended my first HOA meeting. Not because I had to, because I wanted them to see me. The room went quiet when I walked in. Faces I recognized from emails suddenly had expressions attached to them. Polite smiles. Avoidant eyes. A lot of people suddenly very interested in their agendas. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. The ranch was no longer an abstract space on a map. It was a fact. A line they could not cross. A reminder that authority ends where consent does. When the meeting ended, a few people approached me. Apologized. Some genuinely. Some carefully. One man said something that stuck with me. "We just assumed," he said. "She always handled that stuff." Assumption is a powerful thing. It convinces people they don't need to ask questions. That boundaries are flexible if no one is watching. That silence means permission. It doesn't. Today, the ranch is quiet again. The way land should be. No listings. No community access signs. No strangers claiming familiarity they never earned. Just wind, grass, and a property line that means something. I still think about how close it came to disappearing without a fight. How easily ownership can be erased when people confuse proximity with control. And how quickly everything changes when someone finally says no. Not loudly, not emotionally, just firmly with documents in hand and facts on their side. I didn't win by shouting. I won by showing up. And the ranch is still mine.